My name is Gary Price, and I was married to Gwen, who I considered the love of my life. We got married right after college, mainly because she was pregnant, and we were in love. I graduated with a degree in computer science and business studies, and Gwen majored in arts, party, and entertainment, with a minor in finance. I have an EQ of 150 and a photographic memory. Gwen was mostly an airhead, but she could have sex like a train. Our first child was William, followed a year later by Sarah, so Gwen became a stay-at-home mom, and I went to work for the government as a systems analyst for the NSA. My bosses noticed me as an above-average analyst, and a promotion followed. I couldn't talk about my work even with Gwen. Our sex life was great. Gwen was an enthusiast and tried almost everything I suggested. When the children started school, Gwen said she wanted to work and help with the finances. I agreed because no matter how hard I tried, she was never satisfied with what we had. Our mortgage was eating up most of my income. She just wanted a house with a pool and 4 bedrooms in an up-and-coming part of town. So she went to work at an accounting firm as an assistant accountant. The money was good, and I was looking forward to the extra income it would bring. The first check went toward the down payment on her new car, leaving almost nothing for our joint accounts. When I asked her why her salary was transferred to her personal account and not to our joint account, she made a scandal, saying that she earned this money and it should be transferred to her. I went to the bank and closed the joint account, canceled the credit cards, and transferred my salary to my personal account. That evening, when she went to fill up her new car, her shared debit card and credit card were declined, and she had to pay herself. When she got home, we had a huge fight, and she didn't talk to me for a week. Over the next few weeks, things calmed down, and it seemed like everything was back to normal, but I felt like we were growing apart. When Gwen came home that night, I said we needed to talk. After the kids went to bed, we sat across from each other. Gwen looked scared and a little teary, so I started. Gwen, I know things are a little tense between us, and we need to clear things up. You spend more than our budget allows on things we don't need, like your expensive car. This has to stop. You mean you don't want a divorce, it's just about money? I thought you found someone else. Gwen, I don't know how you could say that. You know how much I love you. There can't be anyone else. I only love you, but your spending needs to stop. Okay, honey, I guess I got a little carried away. It's just that all my friends are doing better, and I can't keep up. Friendship shouldn't be a competition, and if it is, maybe you need some new friends. Look, honey, I like my friends, and I'm going to keep them, but I promise to cut costs, okay? If you do this, we won't have to discuss this again. We're fine. That night, she tried to fuck me senseless and almost succeeded. Over the next few months, she kept her promise and paid all of her car expenses herself, even making purchases on her debit card. Our department manager suffered a heart attack at work, and I have been filling in for him for the past 6 months. I was called into the principal's office and informed that he would not be returning as his cardiac condition was long-term, and I wouldn't consider taking his place on a permanent basis. It was a big promotion and came with a significant increase in salary. I, of course, gladly accepted the offer and was glad that I was paid a salary for the entire time I held this position. This also came with a one-time bonus for accepting responsibilities. Our financial future was secure and I could relax. We decided to celebrate this event. I told Gwen after dinner, and we decided to go on vacation later in the year. We approved vacation time with our HR departments and started planning. After looking at many brochures, we decided on a 2-week holiday on one of the Cayman Islands. The night before we left, we stayed with Gwen's parents, where we left the children. The next day, her father drove us to the airport. The only thing that put a damper on our trip was that I had a report to finish, which would take most of the first 2 days. We arrived at the hotel and were shown to our room. It was small, but who cares? We will spend time outside and only sleep here. We had dinner at the hotel restaurant and walked along the promenade like 2 teenagers. That night we made slow, passionate love and fell fast asleep. The next morning after breakfast, we returned to the room and I opened the laptop to start working. Gwen said she would go to the pool to sunbathe and left, agreeing to meet for lunch. I worked for about 2 hours and decided to take a break, opened a bottle of beer, and went out onto the balcony. When I looked down, I saw that I was looking at the pool, and there was my wife lying on a sun lounger talking to an older couple who sat next to her. She opened her tanning oil, and the woman she was talking to said something to her husband. He nodded, and Gwen gave him the oil, and he started rubbing it into her back. I felt a little jealous, but decided that since his wife was nearby, there was no reason to worry. He rubbed the oil into her back, and Gwen reached up and unclasped her bra to give him better access. I immediately got angry and rushed out of our room to the pool, but when I got there, Gwen was alone. "Hey, darling, have you decided to take a break from the report?" "Yes, honey. Who were these people you were talking to?" "Oh, no one special, just an old couple on holiday, James and his wife Mary. They're staying at a nearby hotel, and the two hotels share a pool." We sat and chatted for about an hour, then went to our room to change for dinner. After lunch, Gwen returned to the pool while I continued writing my report. Took a break again and looked down at the pool, and Gwen was talking to the couple again. I decided to go and meet each other. When I walked up to the pool, Gwen waved at me and I walked over. She introduced me and said that Mary had offered to go shopping with her after lunch and Gwen was going to change clothes. Mary said she needed to bring her morning shopping to their room and left, leaving James and me alone. James said he was French, but grew up in England, so he didn't have an accent. We talked about this and that, and eventually the conversation turned to women. James expressed the opinion that women could spend all day shopping and not buy anything, which I completely agree with, and we had a laugh. He then expressed his opinion that women are shallow creatures who can be easily bribed with a few trinkets and that they cannot be trusted. I disagreed and said that Gwen was completely reliable. He laughed and said he could take her away from me by the end of the week if he wanted. I said that he can try, but I completely trust my wife. She will never betray me. He just laughed and said I was naive. Every woman has her value, especially American women, as they are raised to think that men are here to serve them, and American men are conditioned to give in to their women, while men from other races consider women to be temporary pleasures and keep them subservient to men. I was about to argue when James looked at his watch and said he had to go. We shook hands and he left. I was a little concerned about Gwen spending time with people who had these views on relationships, and I decided to warn her to stay away from them. I returned to our room to finish the report. When I returned, Gwen had already left. I went back to the report, and 2 hours later I was done, so I called Gwen on her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail, so I sent her a text message. "I finished the report early. Where are you? I'll come to your place, and we can. Should we go out to dinner?" 2 hours passed before she responded. "Sorry, I forgot to turn on my phone. Had a great time shopping. Wait until you see what James bought for me. See you soon." I waited for her in the room until 7:30 and was about to call again when she burst into the room with several designer label bags. "Where have you been? I've been waiting for you for more than 2 hours. We'll be happy if we manage to get a table this late." "Oh yeah, you go to dinner. We stopped at a restaurant on the way back, so I already ate." "Oh great, so you just forgot about me. Your stupid husband sitting here like a spare tire." "Sorry, I just got carried away and lost track of time. Why don't you go get something to eat and I'll take a shower, and when you come back, I'll show you what I bought." "I think I just lost my appetite. Show me what you bought." She took her bags to the bathroom and came out a few minutes later. To say that I was shocked is an understatement. She was wearing the tiniest suit imaginable. It hid almost nothing. There was less material in it than in my handkerchief. "This is the most revealing costume I've ever seen. What made you buy it?" She pouted and said, "Well, I like it and James said it fits me well." I almost exploded. "What the hell? When did James see you in that?" "Don't be mad. Mary was there too. They helped me pick it out. Look what else they bought me." And she returned to the bathroom and came out in a very revealing cocktail dress, cut almost to the thigh. The dress came with high heels and a sheer cape. I wasn't impressed. I didn't just buy for myself. I have a gift for you too. She handed me an envelope, inside of which was a deep-sea fishing ticket for tomorrow. I know how much you love fishing. I thought you'd enjoy spending the day fishing after all your work. I looked at the ticket. You need to be on the boat by 7:30 a.m. and back by 4:30 p.m., lunch included. I thanked her for the gift, and she ruined everything again. James and Mary invited us to go to a nightclub with them tonight, so you better get ready. No. What? I said no. We're not going out with your new friends today or any other day. I want to spend some quality time with my wife, if that's not too much trouble. But I already said we'll go. I tossed her the phone. Well, you can tell them I canceled. Now put on something that doesn't show everything you've got, and we'll go dancing in the ballroom downstairs. As she started dialing, I added, and don't invite them to join us. We changed and went downstairs, found a table, and ordered drinks. I could tell she was annoyed, but as the evening wore on, she began to enjoy herself and soften up. That night, to my surprise, she tried to kill me with sex. I set the alarm on my phone for 6 in the morning so that I would have time to eat breakfast before leaving. I enjoyed my gift and caught a few marlin, but none big enough to keep. During my lunch break, I called Gwen, and she answered the fourth call. Hi, honey. How's the fishing going? Caught a few, but nothing special. We stopped for lunch. Where are you? James and Mary took me for a walk to a small town along the coast. We're on his boat. Mary and I are sunbathing while James steers the boat. You don't mind, right? Actually, I'm against it. You spend too much time with them. I don't like it. We need to distance ourselves from them. Look, they're my friends, and if I want to spend time with them, that's my business. We should be on vacation together to repair our relationship, or have you forgotten about that? I'm not going to argue and ruin my day now. I'll see you tonight. I returned from fishing around 5 in the evening. The room was empty. I called Gwen, but it went to voicemail again, so I sent a text message and waited. At 8 o'clock in the evening, I received a text with an attachment. I opened the attachment, and it was a photo of my wife in her cocktail dress in front of a nightclub. The text read, I'm going to the club with James and Mary. You're not invited because you said you weren't going. Don't wait for me. I might not be back tonight. I went to the reception and showed them a photo, asking where this nightclub was. They gave me directions, and I called a taxi. When I got to the club, there was a long line. I tried to get through, but the bouncers picked me up and threw me into the bushes. While I was shaking off the dirt, I looked up at the roof of the club and thought I saw my wife standing on the parapet looking at me, but I wasn't sure. I tried to call and send messages to her all night, but finally fell into a restless sleep. The next morning I woke up and immediately tried to call Gwen, but it went to voicemail again. I left a message asking her to call back as soon as possible as I was worried. Then I sent her a text and waited. I went downstairs for lunch, but she never responded. I randomly looked into her closet and noticed several empty hangers, then opened several of her drawers, which were almost empty. When I looked at our luggage, I discovered that her roll-on suitcase was missing. I felt bad and ran to the bathroom. Why did she need to pack her things if she wasn't going to leave? Before I went to lunch, I received a text from Gwen. Sorry you couldn't get into the club yesterday, but James bribed the security guard to keep you out. You would have just ruined my evening anyway. I'm sending this message from James' boat. We're going island hopping for a few weeks. Please don't try to find me. I need to do this. I'll be back in a few weeks, and we can continue as if nothing happened. Love you, Gwen. I was about to respond when another message arrived from James with an attachment. I told you I could get her away from you. Now maybe you'll believe me. All it took was a few $1,000s, and she was back to her bitch self. In fact, it took a lot less time than I thought. I felt her breasts that first morning just by buying her a swimsuit for $200, and in the afternoon I bought her that cocktail dress and accessories for less than $3,000 and got a blowjob. Yesterday we went to a jewelry store and bought some. Her $9,000 necklace and bracelet set. When you saw her standing on the parapet of the nightclub, I was behind her, having sex with her. Now she's all mine. I'll give her back to you when I get tired of her, a little worn and used, but still usable, unadorned of course. With a feeling of loss, I opened the attachment, and there was my wife having sex with James. Apparently Mary was filming the video, Gwen was doing something with her phone, the voiceover was explaining that Gwen was texting me while James was having her. I responded to Gwen's message with just 3 words. No, we won't. I turned off the phone, I couldn't take it anymore. I lay down on the bed and cried to sleep. My marriage was over. The next day I woke up and realized that it wasn't a bad dream. My life had just turned into a nightmare, and there was nothing I could do about it. During the flight, I called Gwen's parents, Ted and Ami, and asked them to meet me at the airport. When Ted asked why we were coming back early, I said I'd explain later. When we landed, I went through customs, collected my luggage, and walked out to the arrivals area where I immediately saw Ted. He looked at me, then behind me, looking for Gwen. When he asked where she was, I said she wasn't coming. What do you mean, won't come? Where is she? Is she okay? Let's go to the car, it's a long story. When we got to the car and loaded our luggage, Ted asked again, "Where's Gwen?" As we drove, I briefly told him that Gwen had left for another man. He didn't believe me, so I said I'll show the proof when we get home. When we returned home, the children were already asleep, and the 3 of us sat down at the dining table to talk. I told them the whole dirty story, and when they still refused to believe me, I showed them the texts and videos. After seeing the evidence, Ami ran out of the room crying, and Ted just sat there, looking broken, then stood up, put his hand on my shoulder, and apologized for raising an easy woman. Ted and Ami agreed to keep the kids for the next few weeks, while I sorted out the situation. The next day, I went to a lawyer and told him about my problems. He asked if there was a chance of reconciliation. When I said there was no chance, he laid out my options. I could have filed for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. I had more than enough evidence, but she would still have received at least a 5,050 division of the property, as well as alimony for her and the children, and she would probably have kept the house until then, until the children reached the age of 18. I told him to get the paperwork ready anyway. There was no way he could stay married to that bitch. Then I made an appointment with the director at work. When I arrived, I was immediately invited into the office. We shook hands, and he asked what the problem was and why I came back earlier. I explained everything, even showing him video evidence. To say that he was shocked is to say nothing. He explained that NSA employees who have experienced a significant event in their lives are required to undergo counseling with a psychologist before returning to their duties. An appointment was made with Amanda Gray, our psychologist, for the next day. I met her one day when I was undergoing a psychological evaluation to join the NSA. She was a couple of years younger than me, about 5'6", with the figure of a 60s model and the face of an angel and a mind like a steel trap. I returned to the empty and cold house that no longer felt like home, just a place to sleep, and wondered when I would see my wife again. Against my better judgment, I tried to call her and found out that the number was no longer available. I called her parents to see how the kids were doing, and they told me everything was fine. They also said they tried calling Gwen but had no luck. I went to the police and reported her missing, showing them the video. They said it was obvious from the video and her text that she left of her own free will, and there was nothing they could do. I wondered what else could be done. I had already taken steps to protect my finances and met with a lawyer, so all that was left was to wait for her to return. I went to counseling and told the whole story again, at the end of which I was in tears. Amanda was very compassionate but remained professional. She said that she would ask me to talk about this experience at irregular intervals, and this would make the pain less with each session. She then asked if I had any idea why Gwen did what she did. The only reason I could think of was that she was fascinated by James' money and fell under his spell. Amanda thought I might be right and asked if there were other issues to discuss. I said I had recurring nightmares about 2 bouncers throwing me into the bushes and laughing about it. She said it was because I felt helpless, which at that moment I truly was. At the end of the session, she said that she did not recommend returning to work until some of the issues raised were resolved, and that I will need to continue counseling for the foreseeable future in order to keep my job, which will remain mine as I suffer from a form of PTSD. After the session, I was scheduled to meet with the director in the afternoon. I was sitting in the dining room alone. The people who usually sat with me avoided looking in my direction and stayed away. When I arrived at the director's office, I was immediately invited into the office. He was very sympathetic and made some recommendations based on what Amanda told him. I have been suspended from duty until further notice pending a medical review. I had to attend 3 consultations a week for the foreseeable future. And to deal with my feelings of helplessness after being thrown out by the bouncers, I was offered a hand-to-hand combat course with the Marines at Quantico after each session. It wasn't mandatory, but I happily accepted the opportunity to improve not only my physical fitness, but also my mental fitness. Classes will begin next Monday and will continue until Wednesdays and Fridays as long as it takes for me to get back to work. I was dreading the first meeting and reliving that terrible week. When I arrived, I was immediately ushered in. Amanda and I shook hands and the session began. I was an emotional wreck again at the end of the session, Amanda said, so she wouldn't be upset, as that was to be expected at such an early stage. I went to a local grocery store for lunch because I couldn't stand the pitying looks from my fellow cafeteria workers. After lunch, I headed to Quantico for my first training session. I was to be briefed by a Marine sergeant named Mike Sanders. He looked me up and down and told me in no uncertain terms that I had a lot of work to do. He then began my physical training regimen, which consisted of strength training, running, swimming, and homework of 50 push-ups, 50 squats, and running 2 miles every day when I was not at Quantico. By the end of the day, I was exhausted and barely even completed my prescribed workout. That night, I slept like a rock for the first time, without nightmares. In the morning, I felt like crap. My whole body hurt, and it hurt just to walk. But I broke a sweat and tried to run 2 miles. I got to the park and had to sit for about 10 minutes to catch my breath. But at least my pain eased up a bit until I was up again. Oh crap, I couldn't run anymore that day, so I went home and took a long hot bath. I was determined to get in shape and make Mike proud, so I joined the gym. The next day was session day, and I limped into Amanda's office when she asked what I had done to make me limp, and I explained. She couldn't contain her amusement and apologized profusely. I said it was okay and started laughing too. She said this was a great start to my recovery, and the session continued. After 2 months of counseling, I was able to talk about that terrible week without breaking down, and Amanda was impressed. Now I look forward to classes, including Quantico, and even homework. I no longer had my daddy belly, it was now an 8-pack. I had gained 20 pounds of muscle, and even if I do say so myself, I looked good. I even changed my appearance a little, buying more fashionable clothes and changing my haircut from short at the back and sides to a military haircut, similar to the Marine Corps, but not as short. After 3 months, Amanda told me I could go back to work, but I would still have to see her once a week. I was a little disappointed by this news as it had attracted me and I wanted to take it further. I invited her to lunch and she declined, saying that it would be unethical to have a relationship with her patient, but when our sessions were over, I should ask again. I was delighted and couldn't wait for her to announce that I was cured. I still hadn't heard from Gwen and assumed I never would. She was clearly enjoying the social life she'd always dreamed of, but I found that I didn't care anymore. I consulted with my lawyer, who said there was no point in trying to divorce her since she was unserviceable. He then explained that it was in my best interest to leave him until she was gone for a year and file for desertion, which I did. After 4 months, Amanda said I would no longer need counseling and invited me to lunch. I was in 7th heaven. Once I resumed work, I realized that it was no longer feasible for the children to stay with their grandparents, so I hired a part-time nanny to take them to school, pick them up at the end of the day, and make them dinner. By this time, I will be home to help with homework and spend time with them. I would take them to my place on Saturday and to Gwen's parents for Sunday dinner. It became apparent that the mother's absence was affecting the children and their grades began to decline. I went to the director, who, after I explained the situation, recommended counseling for the children. I agreed, and the principal organized it twice a week on the school grounds after hours. Amanda and I had been on a few dates, but we had never done anything more than kiss goodnight. I didn't want to ruin everything because I was starting to fall in love with her and didn't know if she felt the same. Until one evening, she invited me to her house to spend the night. I was in no hurry because Ted and Ami had taken the kids for the night and tomorrow was Saturday. I visited Amanda's apartment for the first time and was impressed with how clean it was. I was browsing through her CD collection while she made us some chocolate to drink. She came into the living room with 2 steaming mugs and we sat down. "Harry, we've been dating for over a month and you haven't even tried to get to second base. Are you still worried about your wife's desertion? Or don't you find me attractive?" "No, it still hurts me when I think about what she did to me and the kids, but I don't miss her at all. As for finding you attractive, you are one of the most beautiful women I have ever met. I just didn't want you to think that you were just a reaction. So when are you going to take me to bed, or am I going to have to beg?" I walked over to her side of the table, picked her up, and carried her into the bedroom. She reached out and pulled my head down to kiss me passionately with her tongue. We stood in her bedroom, kissing like 2 teenagers for what seemed like an eternity, but probably only lasted a few minutes. Then we made love. After we came to our senses, we took a shower, and I took her away twice more. Then we went to bed and fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of cooking, took a shower, got dressed, and went to the kitchen. Amanda was just making bacon pancakes, one of my favorites. She looked at me a little shyly and said, "Breakfast is served, master." We both laughed, and I sat down. We were talking about everything except what happened last night. She said that if I was going to stay the night again, we would have to go grocery shopping. I explained that I usually have lunch at Gwen's parents' on Sundays, so I would have to leave early on Sunday morning. We went shopping that day to replenish her supplies. We had lunch at a cafe and decided not to cook at home, but instead went to a good fish restaurant for lobster and salad. I then asked her to go dancing that evening, and she agreed. We spent a wonderful evening hugging each other and dancing. When we got back to her apartment, we went straight to bed, but instead of having wild sex like the night before, we made slow, passionate love. I realized that I was falling in love with her and told her about it. She replied that she felt the same, but we should not rush. I left early the next morning. I needed to change clothes and go to Gwen's parents. By the time I arrived at Gwen's parents, I decided that I would tell them that I was in a serious relationship. I hugged the kids, Ami, and even Ted. They asked what was wrong, and after the kids went back to playing, I explained about Amanda, expecting them to be disappointed. Instead, they hugged me again. They seemed genuinely happy that I had found someone to replace Gwen, since it had been over 4 months since I had heard from her. They asked me to bring Amanda to the next Sunday lunch, and I agreed to ask her. When I got home that night after putting the kids to bed, I called Amada and told her how my in-laws had reacted and that she had been invited to dinner. She said she would be glad to come, but wanted to meet the children first. So I suggested that she come to my place next Friday for the weekend, and I would take her to work on Monday. We agreed to meet for lunch on Monday. When I arrived at work on Monday, my secretary told me that I needed to go straight to Principal George Price's office. I was shown into an office, and there was another man in a standard FBI suit. He introduced himself as Special Agent Larry Smith. I asked what was wrong, and George assured me that I was not in trouble, but Agent Smith wanted to ask me some questions about Gwen going missing. He explained that he had seen the video and was satisfied that she had left of her own free will, and I was not a suspect. He then revealed that there had been no movement in her bank account for the past 4 months. He also said that my story was not unique. Several other American women had also left their husbands in similar circumstances and were never heard from again. The Bureau investigates this, but since it is outside their jurisdiction, they cannot take action, and local authorities are not interested in family matters. He wanted to know if I could add anything to my previous statement. I explained that I had told them everything I knew. He said he would talk to her parents later today to see if they could add anything else. After he left, George asked if I needed anything and how things were at home. I knew he was suspicious, so I told him about Amanda and our relationship, and he seemed relieved that I had come clean without him asking questions. When I returned to my office, I called Amada to tell her what happened, but she already knew because she had a similar conversation with her boss. On Friday, I picked up a very nervous Amanda and took her to my house to meet the kids. As soon as we got out of the car, William and Sarah ran out of the house and ran into my arms. Sarah was the first to speak. "Will you be our new mother?" Amanda looked at me and smiled, a smile that said, "Well, answer the girl." "I don't know, honey, but I hope she wants to take on the role." I smiled at Amanda, and she blushed and picked Sarah up. "Why don't you two show me your rooms?" And they went into the house. Maria said hello and looked at me with a smile, showing a thumbs up. "Mr. Prentice Price, since you said you were bringing a guest home, I prepared something special for everyone for dinner. Fried chicken with all the trimmings will be ready in 15 minutes. I told my husband I would be late to serve dinner and clean up." "Maria, thank you for all your hard work. I am very grateful and insist that you join us for dinner." While I was setting the table, Amanda and the kids came back and told me everything about their rooms and how neat they were. I looked at Maria, who avoided my gaze, and was sure that it was she who had put their rooms in order. The five of us sat down and enjoyed our meal before Amanda helped clear the table and received an approving look from Maria, who simply smiled at me. After Maria went home, Amanda sat and played with the children until they went to bed. To my pleasant surprise, the children insisted that she put them to bed and read them a bedtime story. It was always my job. Even Gwen wasn't allowed to do it. Everything was going better than I had hoped. When Amanda came downstairs, I was making coffee, poured her a cup and said, "Well, it went better than I expected. Your children are absolutely adorable and so well adjusted to their circumstances. I am in awe. I took a lesson from you and sent them to a counselor, and it seems to be paying off. Well done. I have to say I'm impressed." She kissed me on the cheek and hugged me. We sat in silence for several minutes, and I could see that she was thinking about something. "Harry, were you serious when you said you wanted me to be their mother?" "Yes, but only if you want this role. The salary is not great, but there are benefits. What do you say? Is this your idea of the proposal?" Yeah, I think so. Am I rushing things too much?" "Yes and no, you're not in too much of a hurry, and yes, I agree." She jumped into my arms, and we kissed passionately. There was no sex that night because the kids wouldn't understand, and I didn't want to open that Pandora's box. On Saturday, I told the kids that Amanda had agreed to be their new mom, but she wouldn't be moving right away. I think they understood. We went to the mall and everyone drank milkshakes, and the kids bombarded Amanda with questions that she tried to answer. We spent the rest of the morning choosing a ring and finally settled on a diamond ring. Sarah was delighted with everything that was happening, and William could not understand what all the fuss was about. Because the kids were being nice, we asked where they wanted to have lunch, and they all went to Pizza Hut. We spent the rest of the day buying things for the kids, new trainers and football boots for William, trainers and tights for Sarah. We also bought some food for dinner, but the kids weren't that interested. That night, Amanda made garlic bread lasagna, which was a big hit. The kids and I cleared the table and sat Amanda down with a glass of wine as a sign of gratitude. After Amanda put the kids to bed and read them another story, she joined me for another glass of wine, and we sat cuddling. I noticed her looking around the room, especially at the photo from Gwen and I's wedding. I told her that I left the pictures out because I didn't want to completely remove Gwen from the children's lives. She thought it was a great idea since their mother could come back at any time. We finally decided to call it a night and headed to our bedrooms. On Sunday morning, Amanda was making breakfast, and the kids were watching TV when I walked into the kitchen. I walked up to Amanda, hugged her, and kissed the back of her head. She shuddered and leaned back, saying, "If there weren't kids here, you'd pay for it." I noticed she looked a little nervous and asked why. "We're going to see your in-laws after breakfast, and it will be the first time they've met their daughter's replacement." I have to admit, I didn't think about it that way. Now I'm nervous too. But knowing them, I am sure that everything will be fine. After breakfast, we all got into my car and drove to my grandparents'. As soon as we arrived, Ted and Ami came out to meet us. I introduced Amanda to them, and we all went inside. Ami raised Amanda's hand and asked, "When did this happen?" I felt myself blush and answered, "Yesterday." "Is there a problem?" Ami looked at Ted and said, "If she treats you better than Gwen, there won't be a problem. But if she hurts you, she'll have to deal with us." Amanda threw herself into Ami's arms and began to cry. "Don't worry, I could never hurt Harry. I love him too much. And thank you for treating me so well. I didn't know how this meeting would go." Ted walked up to Amanda, hugged her, and said, "Welcome to the family. We consider Harry our son, and now we have a daughter." The day ended with Amanda and I laying down the children, who were fast asleep in their chairs and happily waving to our grandparents. We slept in different beds again for the sake of the children. In the morning, we got up early to go to work, and while we were getting ready, Maria was preparing breakfast. We said goodbye to the children and left. I dropped Amanda off at her apartment so she could pick up her car and drove to work. We met every day for lunch and sometimes went back to her apartment for a quickie. Ted and Ami would take the kids for Friday night so we could go dancing and then go back to her apartment for a night of passion. Saturdays were spent picking up the kids and spending the day together, and Sundays were days with Gwen's parents, and it went on like that. After Gwen was gone for a year, I divorced her for abandonment and received full custody of the children. Amanda and I have set a wedding date for next spring. Amanda and Ami got busy with all the preparations and planning for the wedding. Ted told me not to interfere and just let them do it. My parents died when I was young, and I was raised by an aunt who died shortly after I married Gwen, so I had no relatives to invite, just a few friends. Amanda had an older sister she hadn't spoken to in 10 years and who hadn't responded to our invitation, so she probably wouldn't come either. We invited most of the people who were at my wedding to Gwen, since Ami and Ted insisted on it, saying that we were now family. I thought Ted would cry when Amanda asked him to walk her down the aisle, and Ami actually cried when she was asked to be a witness. I asked William to be my best man, and Ted explained his responsibilities to him. Sarah was a bridesmaid and helped pick out the dress. Almost exactly 2 years after Ted walked Amanda down the aisle and gave her to me, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. The reception was luxurious, but with only 25 guests, not too expensive. We honeymooned in the Bahamas, 14 days of sun, sea, sand, and sex, lots and lots of sex. We returned home tanned and satisfied, ready for married life. Gwen was just a bad memory. 6 months later, Amanda said those terrible words, "Honey, we need to talk." I sat with her with a heavy heart, trying not to cry. "What do you want to talk about?" I thought we were happy. I saw the worry on Amanda's face, and she ran into my arms. "Oh dear, I'm sorry if I said it wrong. There's nothing wrong, and we're really happy. I love you more than I can say. We need to talk because I'm pregnant and we're having twins. We need a bigger house." I almost passed out with relief and pulled her towards me for a long kiss. I was so happy. We started looking straight away. We only had 7 months to find our dream home. With our combined income and 50% of the value of our existing home, we had enough funds to buy a nice 5-room house with a granny annex and a swimming pool not far from where we lived. It was a bit of a troubled house as it belonged to a substance dealer and was ransacked by the FBI for his stash of money. We moved in 2 weeks before Amanda gave birth to Jason Edward Price and Wendy Amelia Price. We named our children after Gwen's parents. Of course, they were delighted. Amanda decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, at least until the kids went to school. We left Maria to help with the workload. For the next 3 years, everything was as good as it could be, or so I thought. One morning I came to work and was asked to go straight to the director's office. I was led inside, and standing next to the director was a man in what could be described as a standard FBI suit. He was introduced as Special Agent Frank Grimes. We shook hands, and he asked me to sit down. When we sat down, George poured us coffee, and when we were all seated, Frank began. "Harry, may I call you Harry?" "Sure, if I can call you Frank." "Now that that's settled, I should let you know that this interview is being recorded. Is that okay?" "As long as I get a copy, I don't see a problem with it." "Of course, first of all, let me assure you that you are not to blame for anything. The recording is for reference only. Could you tell me everything that happened up until the moment your wife sent you the last message?" I told the whole sad story again, hoping that it would be the last time. When I finished, Frank handed me the photo and asked if it was Gwen. I looked at the photo, and even though she looked older and rather tired, it was definitely her. I nodded. "Yes, it's her, a little older, but definitely her. Why?" "She is being guarded in a safe place after her rescue 3 days ago, and she asks to meet with you. She has no right to see you, but she has a right to see her children, and we thought it would be better if you saw it first. I understand why you don't want to see her, but she has a very convincing story about why she hasn't contacted you for the past 5 years. Gwen's story. I was so excited about our trip to the Cayman Islands that I packed and unpacked a half-dozen times until I felt like I had done everything right. And then, the day before leaving, Harry ruined everything by saying that he had a report to finish, and it might take the first 2 days. To say that I was angry would be an understatement. When he reached out to me the night before we left, I turned and moved to the edge of the bed. He wouldn't be getting sex anytime soon. We arrived at the hotel, unpacked our things, and went for a walk along the beach. We went dancing that night, and I felt guilty for denying Harry sex the night before. When we got back to our room, we took a quick shower and went to bed, where I made up for the previous night. In the morning, we had breakfast, and Harry started working on his report while I went to sunbathe by the pool. I was lying there for about an hour when two people sat down next to me in the lounge and started talking. Just chatting, they were married, and he retired early as a millionaire and came here every year. His name was James and hers was Mary. My back was starting to burn a little, so I took out my sunscreen. Mary told James to be a gentleman and apply the cream for me. I didn't see anything wrong with it since his wife was nearby, so I gave him the bottle. While he was rubbing the cream in, Mary asked if I had been shopping. I explained that we had just arrived and Harry had to work for a couple of days. While we were talking, James rubbed cream into my back and asked me to unbutton my swimsuit top. I did it without thinking and continued talking to Mary. As James rubbed the cream into my back, I felt his fingers slide down my sides and touch the sides of my breasts. Instead of judging him, I felt a little excited and said nothing. He finished applying the cream and stood up. Mary said she needed to go back to their apartment to get her hat and asked if I would like to change and go shopping with her for the rest of the morning. I agreed, and we agreed to meet at the hotel entrance in 45 minutes. I was about to return to our room when Harry came up, saying he was taking a break from writing a report. I introduced Harry to James and went to change. I met Mary at the hotel entrance as agreed, and she called a taxi, gave him the address, and off we went. She said we'd have coffee first, so we went to a fancy restaurant and ordered coffee and cake. We were discussing our shopping when James pulled out a chair and sat down. I didn't know James would be joining us, so I was a little surprised. He ordered coffee, and we continued our conversation. After we had coffee, we went shopping. Mary seemed to know exactly where to go, so I just followed her. We walked into a very sophisticated boutique, and Mary and I went our separate ways to look at the clothes. I don't know why I watched, because I couldn't afford anything. Mary walked up to me, followed by James, holding a micro-mini bikini in her hands. "You should try this on, you'll look fantastic." I didn't want to seem like a prude, so I took it into the fitting room and put it on. I might as well be naked. It barely covered my private parts, but it really looked fantastic. "Well, Gwen, let's see what you look like." So I came out to show them. I was a little shy because I realized that James would see almost as much as my husband did when I was naked. I stood shyly in front of James and Mary and turned around a little. James spoke. "You look so good in this. You just have to have it, our gift." I didn't even try to object and hugged him, kissing him on the cheek. Then I went back to the dressing room to change. As I stood looking in the mirror, the door behind me opened and James walked in. I was a little surprised that Mary let him in, but I wasn't too worried. He again said how good I looked in my suit, and then, to my utter amazement, he undid the clasp at the back. I raised my hand to stop my top from falling and looked at him in the mirror. He smiled and reached out, caressing my breasts for a few seconds, then walked away. I stood there wondering if I had imagined it, but still felt a little excited. I quickly changed my clothes and left the fitting room. Mary stood there with James, both smiling as if they knew some secret. Walking past them, Mary said, "They're just having a little fun. Don't worry, it doesn't mean anything." We had lunch and continued shopping. I have to admit, I never thought about Harry the entire time I was with them. Over the next few hours, they insisted on buying me a very revealing cocktail dress and accessories. We stopped at a nice restaurant and had dinner, and Mary invited Harry and me to go to a club that evening. I accepted their invitation and looked forward to the evening. Mary said we needed to go back to their apartment so I could try on all my new clothes for them. On the way, Mary said we needed to buy something for Harry, and I suggested he might enjoy a day's fishing, so James bought him a ticket for tomorrow. When we got back to their apartment, I went into one of the bedrooms and changed my clothes. While I was there, I calculated how much they had spent on me, and it came to almost $4. I went back to the living room and showed them my new outfit. They both came over and adjusted some details until they were satisfied. "You look stunning. Wait until Harry sees you in this." I went back to the bedroom to change, and as I was taking off my new dress, James came in and stood watching me. I wasn't too worried since Mary was outside, and anyway, he had already seen me in a bikini, which was much more revealing than my underwear. He put his hands on my shoulders and turned to face me. "Do you like the things we bought you today?" "Oh yes, they are wonderful. I don't know how to thank you enough." "I can think of a way, and if you thank me properly, there will be even more tomorrow." He then put his hands on my shoulders and pushed me down. I knew what he wanted, and I was shocked, but he had just spent a lot of money on me, and this would be his reward. Then I began to satisfy him. I tidied myself up as best I could and followed him. Mary stood there, and I couldn't look at her. She lifted my face and told me not to worry. It was just his little prank, and she didn't mind. I felt ashamed when I returned to our hotel room. What did I do? Is this considered cheating? When I entered our room, Harry was waiting for me and asked why I was so late, because we could have missed dinner. I forgot that Harry hadn't eaten dinner, and I felt guilty again. I showed him my new outfit, but he wasn't impressed. I even gave him a fishing ticket, but he was still angry. He was even angrier when I said that we should go to the club with James and Mary later. He flatly refused, saying that it was our evening, and forced me to call Mary and cancel the meeting. We went dancing and had a great time. When we returned to the room, I tried to please him to death to ease my conscience. When I woke up in the morning, Harry had already gone fishing, and I didn't expect to see him until the evening. Mary called me and asked if I would like to go to another resort on the coast. I agreed. She also suggested bringing a new bikini and a new outfit. We agreed to meet at the hotel entrance in an hour. We went to James's boat and set sail. I was so excited about what they would buy me today and what I would have to do to earn it. I honestly admitted to myself that I became another man's toy for the sake of expensive gifts, and at some point he would want to sleep with me, and I would not mind. As we set sail from the marina, Mary suggested we change into a bikini and catch some sun. Mary took off her top and said I should do the same, so I did it. I felt so slutty, lying almost naked in front of James and Mary. After some time, Harry called me on my mobile and asked what we were doing. I explained about our trip to another part of the island, and he got angry, saying that he wanted me to stop seeing James and Mary. I said I would do whatever I wanted and see him in the evening, then ended the call. When we arrived at our destination, we went for lunch and then some shopping. This time, they took me to a very fancy jewelry store, and Mary picked out a matching necklace and bracelet set and bought it for me for $9,000. I knew what the price would be for such a gift, and that Harry would be angry, but it wouldn't hurt him that he didn't know. When we returned, Mary said that we should have lunch at their apartment. After lunch, Mary said she had something to do and left me alone with James. We talked for a while, then he stood up and came up behind me. I felt him pull down the straps of my swimsuit and put his hands on my breasts, massaging them. Then we had sex. I realized that I had just committed infidelity, and it would be difficult for me to look my husband in the eyes in the evening. Mary insisted we go to a club that evening, and when I said Harry wouldn't go, she said he wasn't invited. I was a little shocked by such a bold statement, but I agreed anyway. I changed into a new outfit and jewelry, and we went to the club. Before I walked in, I looked at my phone and saw several missed calls and messages, all from Harry. I decided to make him angry because he tried to tell me how to live. He doesn't own me. I stood in front of the club and took a selfie with the club in the background, showing off my new wealth, then added a message. I'm going to the club with James and Mary. You weren't invited because you said you wouldn't come. Don't wait for me. Maybe I won't come back at night. Here you go, you arrogant bastard. We entered the club without waiting in line as James was a regular. Mary said they had a special arrangement with the owner. We were taken to the roof, where a table was set for 3. Mary said we would have dinner first before joining the rest of the regulars. We sat down and were served lobster and surprise bomb salad for dessert, all accompanied by dry white wine. After dinner, I felt a little dizzy and mentioned it to Mary, who said it was probably due to the wine. I walked up to the parapet that overlooked the front of the club. I still felt a little unsure and leaned against the wall, looking down at the line. As I looked down, I felt 2 hands holding my hips and then sliding up to my chest. I felt myself losing my balance and began to suspect that someone had put something in my drink because I couldn't concentrate. It seemed to me that I was looking at myself from the outside. As I tried to focus, I saw Harry trying to enter the club and causing quite a commotion there. As I watched, the hands that had been caressing my breasts moved to my buttocks and lifted my dress above my hips. Harry was thrown into the bushes and was trying to clean himself up. Then he looked straight at me and waved. I just ignored him and continued to have sex. Mary came up to me and began to caress my breasts. This was new to me and so depraved. As I stood there, coming to my senses, James came up and stood next to me. I turned around to see who was having sex with me now, and it was the owner of the club. For the first time in 3 days, I felt shame and disgust at what I had done, and I began to cry. I was taken from the parapet back to the table. Someone thrust a glass of something into my hand, and I quickly drank it. The next thing I remember was lying in the cabin on Jane's boat, and we were moving. I walked up to the back deck, and the sun hit my eyes. We were at sea. I asked where we were going, and was told that we would be island hopping for a week or more. I said I needed to go back to the hotel to talk to Harry. Mary said that I should send him a message that I would be away for a week or more, and that I would call him later as we agreed to last night. I said that I don't remember that we agreed on anything like that. Mary then showed me a video of the club owner having me and said that if I didn't agree to accompany them, she would send it to Harry, so I gave in. She then told me to send Harry the text she wrote and gave me my number. James and Mary laughed their heads off, but I didn't laugh. I just hoped I could save my marriage when I got home. I went down to my cabin and noticed that my suitcase was standing by the bed. It turned out that when Mary went out to run errands while James had me, she took my card from the door. She came into our room and packed her suitcase, bringing it on board. Over the next 2 weeks, we traveled around the islands, but not in the way I had imagined, and I didn't know where we were. At each port, I was locked in a cabin while they went ashore and only released after sailing. Between stops, James had sex with me whenever he wanted. I was no longer considered a friend, but rather a sex slave. I won't pretend that I didn't like the sex I did, but I think it was because they put something in my drinks. One morning I was called to the deck and Mary pointed to a plane approaching our position. It was a seaplane and it landed 200 yards away. James lowered the lifeboat and swam to the plane. The man got into the lifeboat and they returned. When they got on board, James introduced him as Raphael, no last name, and said I should call him Ruff. Mary got the drinks ready and we sat in the stern and watched James and Ruff talk. About half an hour later they came to us. James looked happy and Raph looked at me like a dog looks at a piece of meat, which made me nervous. Mary told Ruff he could take me and use their bedroom. I was too shocked to protest when Raph took my hand and led me. When we entered the bedroom, he ordered me to undress. When I refused, he hit me in the face and I fell to the floor. He picked me up and ordered me to take off my clothes again, and I obeyed. Then he told me, "Now you belong to me. I paid James $200,000 for you, and you will quickly earn me that money back. Now pretend you make love to me like your life depends on it, because it does. If you satisfy me, you will live. If not, you will go swimming, and there are many sharks in these waters. Now earn a living." I agreed. Raph lifted me onto the deck and said to James, "This one is pretty good and will get even better after training. Now take us to the plane. The money has been transferred to your account. So go and bring us more like her." As I was boarding the boat, Mary stopped me to tell me that all my belongings were in the suitcase, except for the jewelry they were using for their next greedy housewife. We took off and flew away from their boat. We stopped twice to refuel, but remained on the plane, and we also changed pilots twice. I had no idea where we were flying and slept a lot. Again, I think substances were used. We eventually landed at a private airfield and were greeted by two men driving identical subs. The luggage was loaded into one, and Raph and I got into the second. We drove about an hour to a small marina, where we boarded a fairly large yacht and set sail. After about 2 hours, we arrived at a small island and moored at a pier patrolled by armed guards, and were transferred to 2 jeeps. As we drove along the only road on the island, which seemed to have jungle on both sides, I saw a building. At first I thought it was just a villa, but it soon became clear that it was more like a small hotel with a helipad. There were armed guards walking around, and at the gate we passed through. We stopped in front of the main building and got out. Raph told the servant to take our things to our rooms, and we went inside. We walked down a short hallway and into a large atrium surrounded by curtained areas behind which I assumed were huge beds. A tall, attractive woman walked up to us and kissed Raph on the cheek. "I take it this is the new girl. Her name is Gwen, and she is quite skilled. Take her to her room and explain the duties and rules." She told me to follow her, and we walked up a spiral staircase to a landing overlooking the atrium below, then down a short hallway to a room marked Celeste. "This is your room, and this is your new name. I advise you to forget your past and accept your new future, so you will be much happier." She led me to a room in which, as I noticed, there was no lock on the door. The room looked like an expensive hotel room. It had its own shower and bath area with a balcony overlooking the sea. There was also a wardrobe and a jacuzzi for 4. My suitcase was on the bed, which was huge and could fit at least 6 people. "My name is Rhonda. You can call me either madam or mistress. You can't talk to men unless they speak first, and you must call them sir. The only men you can talk to are the servants. They are dressed in white. You can also talk to your mentors, who are all women, have a name tag on their left chest, and you must call them ma'am. Do you understand?" "Yes, madam." "Well done. You are not as stupid as you seem. You need to understand that you are no longer Mrs. Ferdinand Price. You lost that right when you had sex with James. You sold your husband, children, and marriage for less than $4,000, so essentially you're just a bought woman. You didn't deserve what you had, and now you've lost it all for a few dollars and a hookup. Your husband is better off without you, so just forget him and your kids. They will probably be raised better by your husband's next wife than by their cheating bitch mother. Your duties are simple. You will sleep with whomever we tell you to, and you will make sure they are satisfied. Any complaints, and you will be punished, depending on the complaint made by either the client or one of the mentors. Complaints range from a simple spanking to, in extreme cases such as attempting to escape, being thrown off the cliff behind your balcony. Do as you are told, and your stay here will not be unpleasant. You are here to entertain our clients and satisfy them sexually. Some will want to hurt you, and you won't complain since they paid extra for it. Some will want you to hurt them or humiliate them. We will teach you how to deal with it. Just know that you are no longer a housewife. You are now an elite, corrupt woman. Over the next month, I was taught to satisfy men and women with all possible sexual techniques. My first party was this weekend, and I was anxiously awaiting it. There were 15 of us to entertain 8 men and 2 women, all from a crime syndicate in Europe. We will dance with them while they paw and grab us, and at some point we will be taken to one of the alcoves and fucked. After that, we'll take a shower and head back to the party until it's over. We will then take a partner or 2 back to our rooms for the night. I think we averaged 3 parties a month and single clients 2 to 3 times a week. I learned from other girls that James was not the only supplier of women. There were at least 2 others. The 3 girls I spoke to were set up by Mary and James, each captured in the same way as me. All 3 were lured by gifts of clothing and jewelry and lured away from their husbands on vacation. I had been in this house of debauchery for almost 5 years, and this weekend was going to be one of the cartel parties. At the last 2 meetings, a particularly nasty cartel boss, Sanchez, asked me to be his only companion for the entire weekend. The last time I entertained him, he gave me 2 gifts. One was 2 broken ribs, and I spent a week in the infirmary, and the second was antibiotic treatment. Rhonda informed me that he asked me again, and I had to satisfy him in every way. The first night he shared me with one of the other girls, and it wasn't too bad. But the next morning Rhonda informed me that I had to pack all my things because he bought me for $200,000, and I had to leave the next morning. I thought about throwing myself off the balcony, but I was too cowardly. I told one of the girls who had become my friend what was going to happen, and she burst into tears. I asked why she was crying, and she said that Sanchez bought other girls, but only kept them for a few months. I asked what happened to them, and she said that one of his guards told her that when he got tired of them, he sold them to a brothel in Mexico. That night when we went to bed, he told me that I belonged to him now, and I would be a very busy woman. I lay in his arms until he started snoring. Then I moved as far away from him as possible and started crying. Oh, why did I leave my perfect life and give in to greed and selfishness? I hoped that I could return to my loving husband and children. As I lay there, brooding and feeling sorry for myself, I heard what sounded like gunshots. I sat up in bed and listened more carefully. There they were again, and a lot of screaming and stamping of feet. Sanchez jumped out of bed and ran to his clothes, looking for the gun. At that moment, the door swung open and 2 figures dressed in black entered the room. One of them inserted a needle into Sanchez's arm and pushed him to the floor, tying his hands and feet. The second figure screamed "clear" and put a red sticker on the door. Then they came up to me, tied my hands, and told me to stay put. I sat there, scared. Then a man came in and asked me who I was. I briefly explained, and he left. Later, a woman in uniform came to me, took off my ties, and told me to get dressed. She then took me downstairs where the other girls were standing. Rhonda was also standing with the girls, so I walked up to her and punched her in the face. One of our rescuers pulled me away. She doesn't belong to us. She's one of our invaders. The woman asked if we were sure, and when we all screamed yes, Rhonda was tied up and taken away. After interrogation in England, I was sent to the United States and conducted another interrogation at FBI headquarters. This is where I am now. I was told that my ex-husband has remarried and his wife is raising my children. I asked to meet with him and my children and am waiting for an answer. Which brings us back to my interview with Special Agent Frank Grimes. Frank then told me Gwen's story. It was sad and I did feel a little sympathy for her, but in the end, it was her fault. In my opinion, she got what she deserved, but we both needed to close this chapter, so I agreed to meet with her. Okay, I'll meet her, but I don't think it will change anything. But as for meeting the children, we'll see. I was led into an empty office where Gwen was waiting. I could see she was nervous, so I started talking. Hi, Gwen, how are you? Hi, Harry, long time no see. You look good. Changed your hairstyle. It suits you very well. As for me, it's been better. Has Frank told you anything about the last 5 years of my life? Yeah, bad luck, but you brought this on yourself. So what are you going to do now? I don't know yet. I don't have money or housing. I was temporarily accommodated in a hotel. I'll probably have to ask my parents to shelter me. Your mom won't mind, but I'm not sure about your dad. He was really mad at you for what you did. I understand him. When I think about what I did, I can't believe it. I'm so ashamed. I even thought about committing suicide, but I couldn't find the courage. I know you'll never forgive me, and I'm not asking for it, but for the sake of the kids, can we at least be friends? Let's not rush. Let's see. As for the children, your parents and I left pictures of you in prominent places so that they would remember you. It may still be a shock to them, and I intend to consult with professionals on how best to introduce you into their lives. I hope you understand that a lot has changed during your absence. They now have a brother and a sister. So I was told you still live in the same house. No, it was too small. We had to sell the old house and take out a mortgage on a bigger house. Oh yes, by the way, you are not without funds. I gave your father half of the capital so that he could save it for you in case of your return. You have always been a good person. I don't know what made me treat you so badly. I just want to make it up to you and the children. I know we had some hard times, but if you would just be patient, things would get better. I've been promoted twice in the last 5 years and am now deputy director of the NSA with a six-figure salary. Anyway, I have things to do. I'll talk to your parents this evening and give them the latest news. I'll let Frank know how it goes and you can move on. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Is that all? We've been married for 6 years and that's it. I made one small mistake for which I paid dearly, and you just threw everything away. You're a creep. I deserve better than this crap you owe me. Okay, I was hoping we could be civil, but let's look at it from my point of view. We go on vacation to try to repair our failing marriage, and 2 days later you abandon me, the kids, and our marriage. You leave with a couple of perverts and say you'll be back in a few weeks. You ruined our marriage the first time you pleasured him on the second day. How did I know about this? He sent me details and a video of you having sex with him and his wife. So don't talk to me about high moral principles when your own house is full of crap. You behaved like a corrupt woman, and you turned out to be so you deserve it. Look at my lips. I don't owe you anything. You're just a lying, cheating bitch, and I'm glad you're no longer in my life. And with these words, I left her in tears. I couldn't do much work that day, so I left early, which was a very rare occurrence. I called Amanda and told her I'd be home early. She immediately realized that something was wrong and asked what happened. I told her there was nothing to worry about and that I would tell her everything when the children went to bed. After dinner, when the children went to bed, we sat down and I told her everything. She sat for a while, thinking. You need to talk to Ted and Ami and figure out how to arrange a meeting with the kids. I know, but I really don't want her to have anything to do with the children. I'm afraid she'll be a bad example. She won't even admit that she was at fault and thinks she can just come back into our lives as if nothing happened. Why couldn't she have done the honorable thing and just died, doing us all a favor? I know you don't think so. You're just mad at her for coming back. From what you've told me, she's been through some very difficult times over the past 5 years and needs counseling, just like you. Now go to Ted and Ami and tell them everything. So I called Ted and told him I was on my way to see them and needed to talk to them. I arrived at Ted and Ami's about 20 minutes later and was greeted by two very excited people. I quickly reassured them, saying that everything was fine and happy with us. We went to the kitchen and Ami made coffee. I told them to sit down. I have news about Gwen. Their faces turned pale and Ami began to fidget. I told them everything from the very beginning, holding nothing back. By the end of the story, Ami was crying and Ted was on the verge of tears. I had calmed down by then and took into account what Amanda had said about Gwen's state of mind. I understand that you are a little shocked by my news, but Gwen is still your daughter, and I know that deep down you still love her. I was thinking that given that she doesn't have a place to live right now, you might want to house her until she gets settled. She will need counseling for a while. I also think this would be a good place to reunite with her children. Is this what you would like to do? Surprisingly, Ted spoke first. Harry, you are such a good person, still thinking about others and their needs. Why Gwen did this to you is still a mystery to us, but you're right, we still love her and would like to have her back while she recovers. And I agree that this would be the perfect place for her to meet her kids and reconnect. When is all this supposed to happen? Look, I don't want to be a middleman in this. I'll give you Frank's number, and you can work things out with him. If there is anything I can do to help make things go smoothly, please let me know. I left, leaving Frank's number with them. When I got home, Amanda was waiting for me and asked how it went. I explained what we had decided to do, and Amanda said I did the right thing and hugged me. The next day I was much more productive at work, beginning the healing process for our family. I contacted Frank and told him that Ted would call him. He thanked me and said that Gwen was still able to after our meeting and had to be sedated overnight. He called me later and told me that he had spoken to Gwen and she had cheered up considerably when she heard the news. I asked him when the meeting would take place, and he said in 2 days. He would go with the consultant to keep things civil, but he wouldn't leave Gwen there this time, and he probably wouldn't until her consultant said Gwen was ready. Amanda and I had to prepare the children to meet their mother. The next day we sat down with William and Sarah. They were now 11 and 10 years old respectively, so they could understand the concept of reconciliation. We talked for a long time, explaining that their mother had made a mistake 5 years ago and couldn't come home, but that she still loved them and missed them terribly. Now she is back, but unwell, and as soon as she gets better, she wants to see them. They didn't seem particularly excited about meeting their mom, but agreed to it on Amanda's recommendation. Frank called me to let me know how the meeting with Gwen's parents went. He said after the initial hesitation, there were a lot of tears and hugs. Gwen begged for forgiveness, and everyone left with good intentions. Counselor Gwen said the meeting went better than expected and was a huge step forward, but she wanted at least 2 more meetings before involving the children. After 3 meetings, Gwen returned to her old room in her parents' house. A month later, the counselor said it was time for Gwen to meet the children. Amanda and I were afraid of this meeting since only me and the children were invited. The children wanted Amanda to be with them too. When Gwen's counselor found out about this, she asked Gwen if this would be acceptable since the children were attached to Amanda as a surrogate mother. Gwen reluctantly agreed, and the meeting was set for the following Sunday when Ami would prepare a full meal. Sunday morning, we all piled into Amanda's minivan and hit the road. The kids were quieter than usual, and the drive was tense. We left Jason and Wendy with a neighbor who looked after them when we left. When we arrived, Sarah started crying, saying she wanted to go home, and it took Amanda a few minutes to calm her down. Ted stood at the open door and led us inside, telling us that Gwen and Ami were waiting for us in the living room. When we entered, the children immediately ran to Ami for hugs. I noticed that Ami and Gwen were crying. Ami spoke first. "Children, this is your mother. She was away for a long time and missed you very much. Go say hi to her." The children hid behind Amanda, only peeking out from behind her, until Amanda spoke to them. "We talked about this. There is no need to be afraid. Go and say hi. She won't bite." Amanda took the children's hands and walked with them to Gwen. She let go of their hands and offered hers to Gwen, who shook it and smiled, "Thank you." Amanda then walked over to me and stood next to me, watching like a lioness watching her cubs. William moved first. He shook Gwen's hand and said, "Hi, I knew who you were when we walked in. Your picture is in our house, but then you looked younger. I think I remember you from childhood." I saw a tear roll down Gwen's cheek. Then Sarah spoke in a very adult tone. "I don't remember you at all. I saw pictures of you at home and here, and Dad says you love us. So why did you go and break my dad's heart? He was sick for a long time, and only his mother could cure him. Where have you been?" Amanda, Ami, Ted, and I were stunned by Sarah's outburst, and I thought Gwen would lose her composure and burst into tears. But her counselor prepared her for this possibility. Gwen wiped her eyes and replied, "Sorry I wasn't there for you and your dad. I made a terrible mistake, and I couldn't fix it. I paid for this mistake 1,000 times and missed you every day. Now I'm back. I hope that you, William, and everyone I hurt can forgive me. I will try to make amends in any way possible if you give me a chance." The day passed. William began to warm up to Gwen. Even Sarah seemed less hostile, but did not stray far from Amanda. After lunch, Gwen sat on the couch and invited the children to sit with her. They both looked to Amanda for permission before sitting down on either side of her. They talked most of the day, Gwen wanting to know everything about their school and interests. As they tried to describe their rooms, Gwen looked at us and said she'd like to see them one day. I wasn't ready for it, but Amanda thought it was a great idea and said so. By the time we left, Gwen and the kids were getting along like a house on fire. After picking up Jason and Wendy, we returned home and put the kids to bed. Now that you've met Gwen, what do you think? I think she's a very troubled woman, but she genuinely regrets her actions and clearly loves children, and she still loves you. Nonsense. If she loved me so much, why did she leave me? I don't think even she knows it, but I know she regrets it more than anything and desperately wants to atone. We discussed the day a little more, then went to bed. We were so emotionally exhausted that we immediately fell asleep. The next morning, Frank called and asked me to pick up Gwen and bring her to the office. I didn't want to, but I agreed. When I arrived at her parents' house, Gwen was already waiting for me and immediately got into the car. I noticed that she tried to look good, even wearing makeup. On the way to the office, we talked about yesterday's meeting and agreed that it was a positive step forward. When we arrived at the office, I was told to go to the war room. I took Gwen down to the basement where she was, knocked, and they let us in. Frank and my director were waiting for us. The director asked Gwen to sign a non-disclosure form and explained, "I invited you both here today because Amanda and Gwen's counselor think you both need to close this chapter after everything you've been through. First of all, let me explain. Your rescue was a byproduct of our and the British joint operation to capture the heads of the cartels at their annual conference. The operation was successful and will significantly disrupt the supply of substances due to the vacuum caused by their capture. The remaining lieutenants will fight each other for months. In addition, we are engaged in dismantling human trafficking networks and their suppliers. Like those two you were unlucky enough to meet, James and Mary. Many of them did not break laws that we could enforce, so more drastic measures had to be taken. The president and his colleagues across Europe signed a document on a clear and present threat. This means that we can take appropriate action without legal procedures. I hope this gives you the closure you need." He then pointed to the screen in front of us. It showed a large motor vessel sailing somewhere in the Caribbean Sea, which I recognized as belonging to James and Mary. He then explained that before they left the port, Navy Special Forces attached an explosive device to its hull, and we watched this through the NSA satellite. He handed us a black box the size of a cell phone. We both understood what it was. I took the device from him and handed it to Gwen. "You suffered the most because of them. Honor you if you want it." She took the box, thanked me, and pressed the button. The effect was catastrophic. The boat simply broke into pieces, parts flying hundreds of feet into the air. I looked at Gwen and could almost see a weight lift off her shoulders. It was the same for me, closure at last. We thanked the director and Frank and left the office. I was given the rest of the day off, so I took Gwen out to lunch. This was the first time we spoke alone in 5 years. We ordered lunch and began an awkward conversation about where to go next. Gwen wanted us all to be friends. I wasn't sure, but I said I'd think about it. After lunch, I called Amanda and told her I'd be home early so she could kick her boyfriend out before I got there. She found it funny but played along, saying that my friend had canceled our weekend. Exactly. Gwen listened to our conversation but didn't seem happy, so I asked her what was wrong. She said that she was amazed by our dialogue, since cheating is not a joke. I replied that in a marriage like ours, it could be a joke. She sat quietly, and when I looked at her, she was crying quietly. I dropped Gwen off at her parents' house and drove home. The kids were happy to see me early, and we played on the floor for several hours until it was time to pick up William and Sarah. They were happy to see me early and asked if we could eat out, so we went to Red Lobster for dinner. That night, after the kids went to bed, Amanda asked what happened, and I explained everything. I even said how Gwen and I felt like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. Amanda seemed pleased and explained that we had finally closed this chapter and that things would be better with Gwen. A couple of weeks later, Amanda suggested inviting Gwen and her parents over for Sunday dinner since Jason and Wendy hadn't seen their grandparents in a while, and it's time for Gwen to meet our children. I reluctantly agreed, and the invitation was made and accepted. The day went without a hitch. All four children seemed to get along with Gwen. William even called her mom a couple of times. The first time it happened, the room went quiet and Gwen looked at Amanda, who simply smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Sarah was still a little distant with Gwen, and when Amanda asked her why, Sarah surprised us all again by saying, "If I call her mom and start loving her again, what will happen if she leaves us again?" I looked at Sarah and saw tears rolling down her face. I think they were tears of shame. Amanda came to the rescue, saying that it was a long time ago and her mother had learned a lot since then and would never do that again. She then did the typical Amandine thing. She walked up to Gwen, hugged her, and said, "Welcome to the family." I don't think there was a dry-eyed adult left in the room. Gwen's parents were not rich, but they lived comfortably without financial problems. But Gwen decided that she needed a job. Her qualifications were outdated, so she enrolled in a local college to take a real estate agent course, which lasted 2 years. Since Amanda and I were now fairly wealthy, we bought Gwen a used Toyota Corolla and gave it to her from all four children for her birthday. And yes, there were tears again from everyone present. Our extended family grew closer every week. Gwen was now a frequent visitor to our house, and I would often come home to find her staying for dinner. She even spent the night with us a couple of times. All hostility was forgotten, and Gwen was accepted as part of the family, even babysitting our children when we left. Life is good. It's been 10 years since Gwen came back into our lives. Unfortunately, her parents passed away 2 years ago within a month of each other, one from cancer, the other from a broken heart. Gwen now owns her parents' house, and with the money they left her, she is well settled. She works at a real estate agency and spends most of her free time with us. She and Amanda have become best friends, and they go on spa weekends and to the theater together while I stay with the kids. As far as I know, Gwen never dates men or is interested in them. Amanda says it's because of her memories of being a sex slave. I think she got what she deserved, but it made her a better person, and I finally forgave her, and Amanda says it makes me a better person. In the end, only time will tell. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.